Welcome into NOBS Fantasy Football. Today is all about the waiver moves that you can make in Week 16 to help you get a win. And I'm especially excited for today's video because you can see here that I have punched my ticket to the championship in my home league that I've been playing in for years. So these are the moves that I'm also going to be making. And we've got waiver ads for every position, including defenses, and some of the players you're going to want to add to start for your teams in Week 16. And some of the players, particularly the defenses, you may want to add to block your opponent from getting one of those key defenses. Then we're going to close out the video with the drop strategy that you should be using at this point in the playoffs. Before we get to the quarterbacks, make sure you're subscribed because later this week, we're posting a full start-sit video for every position. Also on Sunday, you want those notifications on because we'll be going live to answer any of your last-minute questions. Plus, if you have any questions down in the comments, subscribers, I prioritize your questions first for supporting the page. Our first quarterback ad is going to be JJ McCarthy. And right off the bat, this is a player, if your opponent maybe lost Patrick Mahomes, maybe they got lucky with some other players, you do not want them to get JJ McCarthy. So I'd also add him to block if you already have a good quarterback as well, because look at what he's done in the last 2 weeks against easy matchups. 20 points against the Commanders, 24 points, including some rushing against the Cowboys. And this week, he has another extremely easy matchup. So while there is a chance he could give you a dud week like he did in Week 12, in Week 13, in Week 11, there's also the chance that he drops the 24 to 25 points. And if there's no one else better on the waiver wire in your league, do not let your opponent in the playoffs scoop up JJ McCarthy, who could put up 20 points. Our second quarterback ad, definitely not preferred like JJ McCarthy with his easy matchup, is Bryce Young. We have seen some ceiling games from him, like 31 points against the Falcons, 22 points against the Rams, and he does have a great matchup this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a huge game for that division. If you do need a quarterback, again, I would go with JJ McCarthy. I would add him to block your opponent as well, but if there's nobody else available, add Bryce Young. Maybe there's no quarterbacks in your league. Make sure your league mate who needs a quarterback does not get someone for free when you've got someone you can drop, and we're going to cover that strategy later. The priority ad at running back, whether you need him or not, but someone you could definitely start is Michael Carter. Again, this is someone you don't want your opponent who needs a running back to get for free, but if you need a running back, this is the ad because Bam Knight got carted off the field. These Arizona running backs are getting injured. They are dropping like flies. You can see a good receiving floor here. We see 4 receptions in this game against Houston, a really tough team, 13.7 points, good rushing yards. He's going to be a priority player in Week 16 against the Falcons, who have been a relatively soft matchup. At least they're not the difficult matchup like the Rams, like the Texans. So Michael Carter, if you need a running back in your league, is definitely an ad. Let's jump to the next guy. Somehow he keeps coming back. Bill Merritt started off the year strong, absolute drop in the middle of the season, and somehow has 15.6 points in the playoffs, 96 yards, and a touchdown. Like the matchup next week against the Eagles, they're not the toughest team against the run. The main concern here is that if Chris Rodriguez does come back, Bill Merritt is unstartable. But if you've got Chris Rodriguez on your bench, adding Bill Merritt and having the choice between the two is a great move and can set you up for a win in Week 16. And as we get to the wide receivers, if you like this no BS style where there's no fluff, there's no frills, we get right to the point every time, make sure you like this video. I appreciate that a lot. Make sure you're subscribed as well to get this kind of content this year and next year as well. Our first wide receiver is AD Mitchell. We saw a great week in Week 13. Remember, that was a week where John Mechie was covered by AJ Terrell. He kind of disappeared against Miami, but then comes back with 17 points in this game, 6 catches. He has a touchdown. He has 9 targets, and he set up a pretty safe target floor. So if you're in need of a wide receiver, maybe you lost Devonta Adams. We'll see if he plays or not. He's got that Thursday night game. If you lost another wide receiver, maybe the quarterback for your team got injured, for your wide receiver got injured, like some of these Colts players, AD Mitchell is a high upside play that has consistent target volume. Adding him off the waiver wire is a great move and someone I'd look to see if your opponent needs if there aren't other good wide receivers on the waiver wire. This is a lot like Bill Merritt. If you guys use the timestamps down below, you may want to check out each one because there's players you need to block from your opponents, and Troy Franklin is no exception. If Pat Bryant, who's dealing with a hamstring injury, that was the difference. If you're wondering, like, why did Troy Franklin suddenly start doing bad, then start doing good, even against easy matchups? Pat Bryant, he stepped up. He's a rookie wide receiver for the Broncos. He stepped into these games, and he's been demanding target share. But he was out this game against Green Bay, and that allowed Sutton to have a great game and Franklin to have a great game as well. So if Pat Bryant is out, Troy Franklin is a must play, and he's available in 50% of leagues. I certainly wouldn't want my opponent to be able to get this guy, but I would add him myself as a high upside play if Pat Bryant misses. Maybe the most important ad of the video is Dalton Schultz at tight end. This is another one that you can definitely start if you're hurting at the tight end position, but I would certainly, if your opponent or someone else on the other side of the bracket needs a tight end, I am dropping somebody I don't need that they probably don't need either to make sure they do not get Dalton Schultz, because look at his performance against the easy matchups. He's done really well these last few weeks. He does have a tougher matchup against tight ends against the Raiders, but with Kenny Pickett probably at quarterback or whoever's the quarterback, this team is struggling. Houston is eating these teams alive, so I would certainly scoop up Dalton Schultz off the waiver wire. Plus, you look at the targets here. He's seeing 8 targets, 11 targets, 9 targets, 8 targets, 9 targets. He does have a tougher matchup. I will give you that. But the Raiders overall do allow a lot of points, and I'm not letting my opponent get Dalton Schultz. And if you need a tight end, he's the best, most consistent option available on the waiver wire. If he's not there, Theo Johnson might be, and he's certainly not my priority because he's far riskier. You can see in his reception numbers, most weeks it's just 3, 3, 3, 3, 7, 3, 3, 3, 3. The definition of consistency, but some weeks he's getting 75 yards, 77 yards, 66 yards, 72 yards. That is the upside for a player like Theo Johnson. He's not receiving too many targets like Dalton Schultz, but the targets he's receiving, he's making great after the catch plays, making plays down the field. That's the type of player that can bring you decent upside. And facing the Vikings, not the worst possible matchup. They have been pretty good against wide receivers lately. Isaiah Rodgers, Josh Metellus, we know is a little bit weak in terms of fantasy points per route run. But against Minnesota, Theo Johnson could be a standout player for the Giants and does have that upside even though he's a risk. Now on to the defenses. Then we're going to talk about the drop strategy because, of course, to add these players, you've got to drop people and your opponents can pick them up. That's the kind of thing we're going to be talking about in the drop strategy section. But first, the defenses. The Bills, and I apologize for this, they're not quite available in 50% of leagues, but it's very close, and they have one of the best matchups of highly available defenses facing the Cleveland Browns. Now, they have not been good. They are weak against running backs in Cleveland. They've got Quidshot Junkins, but Shadur Sanders, he's got a little bit exposed this week against the Bears with multiple interceptions. They've been punting. They're going to have to pass as well. That's going to be the disadvantage of the Browns this week is against the Bills. The Bills are going to score points. I don't care if Myles Garrett is going for that sack record. He's probably going to get it, by the way. But the Bills are going to score points. They're going to put pressure on Cleveland to pass, which is going to take away some of that run game, force Shadur to pass even more. That's where they could force the interceptions, the turnovers, the sack fumbles. That's why you have to get the Bills for your team this week. And if you already have a good defense, you've been prepared, you've got the Texans, you've got the Eagles, you've got somebody great for this week, do not let your opponents get the Bills. Force them to go with another defense that has a worse matchup than the Cleveland Browns. But available in 81% of leagues, I love the Saints defense. And again, they have not been amazing this year, but they do have a good matchup against the Jets. I don't know who the Jets quarterback is going to be, but whoever it is, it's an easier matchup than a lot of defenses that are highly available have this week. There certainly aren't a lot of good options out there. So the Saints, if the Bills aren't there, they are a defense you can pick up if your defense is struggling. Now on to the all-important drop strategy. And by the way, if you skipped here in the timestamps, you're going to want to check out each position because even if you don't need a running back or a defense, there's defenses you want to block from your opponents getting, and that's a lot of what we covered today as well. But who are you going to drop? How are you going to make room for all of these waiver ads? Well, the first criteria is I'm not even going to add somebody if they're not going to start for me or they would not start for my opponent. We are too late in the season to add players that will ride the pine, that will be on the bench. So if they're a bench player, don't worry about them. But if they would start for you or your opponent, the main thing we want to look at for dropping a player is that exact same criteria. If they are going to start for my opponent this week, the person I'm playing this week, I do not want to drop this player. I want to drop somebody else. So maybe I'm dropping my best wide receiver off the bench who's not my worst player. I'm not going to drop my worst player. I'm going to drop the player that helps my opponent the least. Let's say my opponent has done some trading or some great drafting, and he's got Jamar Chase, he's got Puka Nacua, and let's assume he's fully healthy, ready to go. He's got Amon-Ra St. Brown. Well, he's got 3 wide receivers right there, so that's 2 starting wide receivers and a flex. I could drop pretty much any wide receiver off my team, even if they're good. Someone like Courtland Sutton, who had a great week this week. Someone like Jameson Williams, he is not going to play that player in his starting lineup, so I could drop anybody. Now, obviously, I'm not going to drop those guys because they are really good. They probably would play for my team, but that's an example to show if they're not going to start for your opponent, you can drop them. It's not just dropping your worst player, because maybe your worst player is a tight end. You don't need, they're definitely not going to start for you, but your opponent could actually use that tight end. We want to drop somebody else. So that's the key for dropping players, is making sure they're not going to help you this week, they're not going to help you next week, and they're not going to help any of the opponents that you might face as well. And you can feel free to drop anyone that meets that criteria.